Hello students, welcome back. In today's lecture, we're going to continue our discussion on the respiratory system. In this lecture, we will identify 22 anatomical features of the respiratory system. As before, we will first describe and name these features, and then we will annotate them at the end. Before getting started, let's bring back the human form we ended with in the last lecture. The entry point for air into the body is the nostril. The anatomical name for a single nostril is the anterior nares. The plural, both nostrils, would be the anterior nares. From here, the air travels through the narrow air passages called meatus. The meatus are formed between folds in the lateral wall of the nasal cavity. These folds are called nasal conchae. On the top, we have the superior nasal concha, and moving down, we have the middle nasal concha and the inferior nasal concha. Together, these nasal conchae and the meatus cleanse, warm, and humidify the air. From here, the air moves to the posterior opening of the nasal cavity. A single opening is called the posterior nares, or the choana. The plural would be the posterior nares, or the choani. From here, the air travels through the upper part of the pharynx. This part of the pharynx behind the nasal cavity is the nasopharynx. The air then moves to the region of the pharynx behind the oral cavity. This is the oropharynx. The air then moves to the last part of the pharynx behind the larynx. This is the laryngopharynx. Within the pharynx are patches of lymphatic tissue which guard against ingested or inhaled pathogens. These lymphatic structures are called pharyngeal tonsils at the top of the pharynx, the palatine tonsil at the end of the soft palate, and the lingual tonsil at the base of the tongue. There's a tube which connects the nasopharynx with the middle ear. This tube is called the auditory tube. It is sometimes referred to as the eustachian tube. It is named for the Italian anatomist Bartolomeo Eustachio, who discovered it. From the pharynx, the air moves into the larynx. The larynx is formed by the framework of 9 cartilages. The largest and most anterior of these cartilages is the thyroid cartilage. The anterior peak of this cartilage is called the laryngeal prominence, commonly referred to as the Adam's apple. Inferior to the thyroid cartilage is a ring-like cartilage which connects the larynx to the trachea. This cartilage is called the cricoid cartilage. Forming the framework of the trachea are 16 to 20 C-shaped rings of hyaline cartilage. The gap of the C faces posteriorly and allows the esophagus to expand as swallowed food passes by. Shown here are the tracheal cartilages. From the trachea and through the bronchi and bronchioles, the air eventually enters the lungs. The right lung has 3 regions separated by grooves. These regions are the superior, middle, and inferior lobes, and the grooves are called fissures. The left lung has an indentation to allow space for the heart. This indentation is called the cardiac impression. Consequently, the left lung is smaller and only has 2 lobes. Each lung has a superior pointy end and an inferior broad surface. The superior pointy end of each lung is called the apex, and the broad inferior end is called the base. At this point, we will conclude this lecture by annotating all of the features we have noted. For the smaller features, I have added a larger representation by the annotation for the sake of clarity. So this concludes our 3rd lecture on the identification of the features of the respiratory system. In the next lecture, we will look deep into the lung and explore the structure of the alveolus. I hope that you've learned a lot.